Hello and welcome to Wine Blast, where we are talking rosé, but not in a trivial, flippant kind of way, which to be fair is often how rosé is treated. No, in this episode we're going to bust some tired myths and urge you to completely rethink your rosé.
How's that for intent? Yeah, no more cheap pink puns here. No, sir, it's time to take rosé seriously. That doesn't mean you can't enjoy it or you have to stop splashing it all over your Instagram feed, nor does it mean that rosé needs to stop being one of life's great simple pleasures. It's just that there is a rosé revolution going on and we don't want you to miss out.
Here's a taster of what's coming up.
Open your mind, taste, you will be surprised. And don't look the colour, just taste and you will see.
I'm not looking for perfection. Perfection is dull. I am looking for a wine that I will take a sip of and I'll go, that was interesting. That has stimulated my taste, my ideas, my curiosity. Stop seeing it as rosé, seeing it as good wine.
Caroline Deforges of world-famous Provençal rosé producer Clos Cibonne there, followed by rosé expert and fellow master of wine Elizabeth Gabay. Both names we've featured on the pod before, and we're delighted to have them back on to bring this episode to life. We've also got some cracking rosé recommendations for you. What a programme we've got coming up. Where to start?
Well, just before we do start in earnest, can we immodestly toot our own trumpet a bit, because we wanted to just thank the judges and sponsors of the inaugural 67 Pall Mall Awards after we were named as finalists in the audio category for our Wine Blast episodes on Light Strike and Orange Wine. We are absolutely chuffed and we feel very honoured, don't we?
We absolutely are and do. It was wonderful news, wasn't it? Thank
It
you
was.
to all
It made our
concerned.
day.
It did. Including to 67 Pall Mall for this new initiative supporting wine communication around the world. Congratulations also to our fellow nominees. Do check out their outstanding work. It's well worth a browse.
Anyway, that's quite enough tooting, I think. Back to the rosé and on with the show. Now, I know we want to get onto some myth-busting and cardinal sins, which we think will be a fun way of going about this. But before we do, we should explain what we're doing and why.
Well said. We do love a good explainer on this pod, don't we? Yeah. Okay,
Bit of context.
Rosé is on a bit of a roll and has been for a while now. According to a recent OIV report, rosé production grew 25% between 2001 and 2021. Interestingly, red wine production actually fell by exactly the same amount over the same time frame, 25%. Coincidence? Almost certainly not to my mind, even though, as to be said, red wine is obviously a far bigger total of production. But it does seem the world wants white and rosé more than red these days, with rosé wine now accounting for more than 8% of global production, up from 6% 2 decades ago. Incidentally, 3 countries account for more than 2/3 of production, and they are France, Spain and the US.
And another 2023 report, this time by data consultancy CGA, revealed that 21% of wine drinkers in the UK were consuming rosé more often than they were the year before.
We're definitely
Also,
in those numbers, aren't we? We're definitely... Our rosé consumption is ramping up, isn't it?
I think it does. Anyway, also that 34% of UK consumers typically drink rosé in bars and restaurants. So it seems the trend is generally for more rosé, and not just in the garden in the summer, but also in more mainstream and possibly fine wine environments too.
Yeah, that's intriguing, isn't it? And I think anecdotally, it does just seem as if rosé is on trend right now, doesn't it? It's popular, it's buzzy, it gets people excited, it gets people talking.
It does indeed. Maybe a bit like orange wine in that sense. And we'll come back, won't we, to orange wine in a bit because it is relevant here. But one thing I did just want to highlight was that the OIV stats include sparkling wine. So the figures for white and rosé wine include fizz, and let's face it, there's not much red fizz, is there? But sparkling wine is another category that continues to perform well. And just one fact to mention here about Prosecco. Rosé Prosecco wasn't permitted under the appellation rules, but a few years ago they decided to allow it. And in that space of time, it's gone from effectively 0 to 75 million bottles sold every year.
75 million bottles of Rosé Prosecco from nothing to in a couple of years.
In a few years, yeah. Out of about, I think it's about 650 million bottles of Prosecco in total. So that gives you an idea of the potential power and popularity of rosé, using just one very specific example.
Yeah, I mean that's amazing, isn't it? So a tenth to come from nothing. Wow. And yes, you cite it as an example of how rosé can do well. I suppose you could throw in the wild success of what we might call premium rosé, or just posh rosé. Probably sounds better, posh rosé. Those sort of super glam wines, often with a pretty hefty price tag, usually, but not always, from Provence or southern France, with huge marketing budgets behind them and names like, Whispering Angel, which everyone knows.
Everybody knows,
Garros,
don't they?
Domaine de Lille, Galoupé, they've definitely captured the zeitgeist, haven't they?
Definitely. But at the same time, what we've noticed is that alongside all of this fun and games that's been going on, there's been a kind of alternative rosé scene developing, perhaps enabled by the broader popularity of the rosé category as a whole, but also set apart because the rules of their game are different. They want to smash through the traditional glass ceiling of rosé as a fun but forgettable summer quaffer. They want to make serious, complex, age-worthy, characterful, ultimately potentially great rosé, and they wanted to sit up and take notice of it.
Yeah, because it's true, isn't it, that the rosé has, I guess in modern times, never been taken particularly seriously.
No.
Actually, it's pretty patronising when you think about it, our attitudes to it sometimes. I read an article recently when, a pretty respected wine writer was saying effectively, rosé shouldn't even bother trying to be a serious wine because we don't want to have to think that much about it when we're drinking it. That's like saying all white or red shouldn't bother trying to be great because there are lots of cheap and cheerful whites and reds, and it's not only patronising. I think it's doing wine lovers a disservice because it's becoming pretty clear that rosé does indeed have the potential to be great.
So where's the Romani Conti of rosé? That's the question. Anyway, before we get ahead of ourselves, I think we should start by shaking things up, put the cat among the pigeons, as it were, by airing that short quick-fire question round you did with Liz Gabay.
Good idea. Okay, so Liz Gabay is a well-respected master of wine and global rosé expert based in southern France. She works with her son, Ben Berhneim, and together they recently put on a fine rosé day at the excellent Trivet restaurant in London, a tasting bringing top rosé wines and producers together from all over the world. This was one not to miss. I was powerless to resist, of course. And they absolutely smashed it. I got to grab Liz and Ben at the event, so there's a bit of background noise in the interviews.
You had that much rosé, you were grabbing Liz, did you?
I secured them for an interview. Let's put it that way. If you're going to be pernickety, we're going to feature snippets of the interview throughout this episode. And this was just a brief quick fire I did with Liz to get us warmed up. Can rosé be fine wine?
Yes.
Rosé in magnums, good or bad?
Yes, good.
Rosé in cans, good or bad?
Good.
Should we be aging our rosés?
Yes.
Which ones?
The wines that have been aged the most successfully, slightly more maceration. I mean, okay, What makes a wine age? Acidity, sugar, tannins.
What are the things to avoid? Any rosé cardinal sins in your book?
I don't like tutti frutti, boil sweet type rosé. I'm not a fruity sort of rosé. I do like a sort of a bit more structured, a bit more saline. Cardinal sins, dreadful labels, clear bottles. People saying this is for summer, swimming pools. I don't have a swimming pool. Yeah, I don't want dullness. Don't want dullness.
Life's too short for boring wine. I think we quite agree, don't we? Yeah, and indeed too short for mincing words. So good to see Liz not beating around the bush. Yes. Some pretty punchy views there.
Yeah, quite right. So to tackle this big amorphous topic that is rosé, we thought what would work best is to bust the myths one by one. Just go through a series of, outdated, misguided, unhelpful views regarding rosé and challenge or question them to help us rethink rosé and appreciate it better. We're even going to ask the most basic question of all: what even is rosé?
Okay, enough preamble. Let's get going. Myth number one: Rosé is for the indecisive.
Okay. So
seriously.
So this one is definitely tongue-in-cheek. Just to start on a lighter note, it's a reference to the episode of Rosé we did way back in series 1, all that time ago.
That is a while ago.
I can't remember what it's called. It was called...
The Best Rosé Ever?
That's right, yeah. The Best Rosé Ever.
Snappy title.
Snappy, never understated, our titles. But in that one, Lee Isaacs was hilarious in his heroic opposition to Rosé, saying not only was it the drink of Satan, but it was essentially a wine for people who couldn't make their mind up whether they wanted white or red.
That's too funny. But to make a serious point, rosé is doing well precisely because people are seeking it out as an active choice rather than it being an alternative for the indecisive. Anyway, here's what Ben Berhneim had to say.
The most exciting thing about rosé today is that people want to drink it. It's not a category of wine that we feel that we're forcing on customers, on drinkers, on consumers. People are going out there drinking it, and it's the wine trade that's thinking, but why are they drinking this rubbish? It's nothing like any other wine, where it's not some producer made a wine and tried to sell it. It's people are clamouring for it, and that's what's exciting about rosé, that it's actually what people want.
People actually getting excited about wine. Now there's a thing.
We never do that, do we?
Well, never. Banish, perish.
Never.
We do it all the time. That's not the problem. The problem is most people out there, for them wine, actually when they get excited and they think, rosé, there's a thing we can get excited. That's fantastic. Anyway, I'm going to come in here with a big myth.
Go on.
Myth number 2. Rosé is pink. Or that rosé is rosé, or rosy, or whatever, or any colour at all, frankly.
I think we're on colour, aren't we?
Because the truth, when you actually think about it, is that rosé comes in a huge range of colours, from something that looks like a white wine, but with a very faint copper tinge, right through orange and gold and amber to pale pink, bright pink, baby pink, salmon pink. Disco pink could be one we could throw in there somewhere.
Pink.
I've definitely written that down sometimes. Pale ruby, and of course, right up to what you might consider a sort of pale red wine.
So we shouldn't belittle it by defining it simply as pink. We should think of it as a broad spectrum that's not a red nor a white, nor is it an orange wine. It's a bit ill-defined, but in a way, all the better for it.
Exactly, and that's kind of the point. We don't want to define it. We don't want to limit it too much. It's a gloriously diverse section of the wine colour continuum. Think of it as like drinking the sunset, which can be any colour, can't it? Anyway, I put this issue to Liz. Does colour matter when it comes to rosé?
No, absolutely not. Well, no, it does. Actually, it does matter. Because when you have people who make rosés with no colour, that matters. That's a white wine. But what I have noticed is that some producers are saying the market wants more white wine, and so we're getting paler and paler rosé. And then you ask that philosophical question, when is a Blanc de Noir become a white wine? But also a growing number of rosés that are almost a red wine, but a light, fresh red wine, which is why I was saying earlier, forget categorization, because that's just such a Victorian concept that we put everything into a box. And that's what I like about rosé, is there are no boxes. There should be no boxes. There are some producers who still work in boxes, but there are plenty of producers who are, for one reason or another, completely open to any other idea. I was talking to one of the producers earlier today, and he said, people don't taste my wine when they buy it. They just look at the colour and they choose by the colour. And that was from big buyers. It's good wine. That's what I'm really looking for. And I think my main aim for today is stop seeing it as rosé, seeing it as good wine.
So there's another related myth to add in here, and that's myth number 3, that rosé has to be pale to be good. Nonsense. It's a trend because Provençal rosé is popular and that's naturally quite pale. But pale rosé can be full flavoured. It can also be disgusting. And deeply coloured rosé can be delightful and delicious and elegant. Do not judge a book by its cover.
Well said. And Liz did actually make the point that, a really pale colour in rosé can actually be related to things like high levels of sulphur or very particular use of cultured yeast, which can be the sign of a really quite boring, one-dimensional wine. So, that's not good either.
No. And talking about colour, we absolutely have to touch on myth number 4. Ooh. Rosé should come in a clear, colourless flint glass bottle. Oh, what do we think about that? Don't like it.
That's a.
Now this is a big one, isn't it?
It's a really big one.
Yeah.
We railed against this in our recent episode on Light Strike. If you haven't listened to that one, press pause now, drop everything, go and listen, and prepare to be shocked by the scandal of how these clear, colourless glass bottles are damaging your wine and robbing you of your rightful drinking pleasure. It's a massive issue, but particularly for rosé, because they virtually all come in these bottles these days. And these bottles are ruining the wine.
Yeah, and I mean, the wine trade would say, but people like to see the colour of rosé before they buy it. But if we accept colour isn't important, which it isn't, then why do we have to put rosé in a bottle which can render it tasteless and lifeless extremely quickly when it's exposed to light? We can have a rosé section in a shop or a website. People get that. We can use coloured labels or neck foils or wax maybe to advertise the colour or the style.
Exactly. And I think
you don't need the clear glass bottle.
Too often the defence is we do it because that's the way it is and how it's always been done and how everyone else does it, so we can't change. It's absolutely bonkers. Someone needs to take a lead on this. In fact, some people are, and it's great to see, but the minority, I just hope more people, retailers, producers can follow suit and the wine trade can just stop burying its head in the sand over this one. Enjoy the colour of the wine in your glass, not in the bottle.
Yeah. I mean, it's sort of like Heinz saying, we're going to put all our tomato ketchup in clear bottles. There's a good chance by the time it gets to you, it will taste significantly worse, but it looks cool. And you can see that wonderful tomato colour when you buy it.
Yeah, which is why I guess Liz said yes to rosé in cans.
Yeah.
She also mentioned that clear glass generally can contain less recycled content than dark glass, so it's potentially worse for the planet too. So I guess we'd urge you to seek out and support rosé that's not in clear, colourless glass bottles, because it will quite simply taste better, you get better value for money, plus it's better for the planet. Here's what Liz had to say.
A lot of wine buying is guided from the top. Going to Waitrose, they're recommending a brand. The magazines are recommending the same brand. And I think the media, the influencers, the buyers are very much to blame. So if we want the market to change, we need to have louder voices. So the two of us talked about dark bottles and Light Strike recently. You did the podcast, I've done articles, and people are suddenly kind of going, we've never thought of that. And you think, so we really do need to be out there, and I think people, serious wine people, and I'm talking a lot about masters of wine as well, master sommeliers, and everybody, we need to take action, and we need to be less like sheep, and we need to be far more provocative and challenging in what we're suggesting.
So here we are, being provocative.
Yay!
And there is much more of the same coming up as we tackle sweetness, swimming pools, food, aging rosé, Provence, fine wine, ice, brosé, and we even question the very definition of rosé itself. By way of quick recap, it's time to get beyond the tired stereotypes and start thinking outside the box when it comes to rosé, because that way a world of pleasure lies. So bin the clear, colourless glass bottles, realise that colour doesn't matter, and understand that rosé is most certainly not just a last resort for the indecisive.
Okay, so we're going to rattle through a couple of quick ones now. Myth number 5 is that rosé is sweet. Actually, it's kind of a contradictory double myth, because while that myth definitely persists, there's also a corresponding, perhaps related myth that rosé has to be dry to be good, maybe among different
So let's take those sweet dry one by one.
Yeah.
Firstly, all rosé isn't sweet any more than all white is sweet just because some whites are. There's a fair bit of rosé that is sweet, lots of blush styles or White Zinfandel, for example, and a fair chunk of the overall volume of still rosé sold in the world is sweet. That is true. But equally, there's a lot of rosé that is dry as a bone.
Yeah, but just because it's a dry rosé doesn't mean it's a good rosé. There are some rosés that are sweet, but which are really good quality. You know, Liz mentioned the 1959 Cabernet d'Anjou rosé she had in our last episode, and best rosé ever, which was sensational. Great Riesling or Chenin Blanc can be sweet and can be some of the finest white wine on the planet, and age-worthy too, because sugar helps wines age. So, you know, there's no reason that sweet rosé can't be great too. So again, just want to be humble about, important to take each wine on its merits.
Yeah, and I suppose you could add that rosé sparkling wine, including rosé champagne, can often have some sugar added to it in the dosage. It will tend to be a very small amount and only to balance the wine rather than make it sweet. And these can be some of the finest rosé wines on the planet, and they can age magnificently as well.
Okay, so let's shake things up again now. We've mentioned Provençal rosé a bit in this episode, the southern French region of Provence, which specialises in dry, pale rosé, which can make for great, easy drinking, food-friendly wines. And we've already mentioned the posh Provençal rosé phenomenon, you know, pricey, glam southern French rosés, which appeal to the jet set and have become really quite popular lately. So let's call this myth number 7. Posh rosé, or even good rosé, is all about Provence. I asked Liz for her thoughts on posh rosé wines.
Maybe that's the rebel in me, the sort of the communist hippie coming through from my earlier days. Are they the McDonald's of rosé?
Gourmet Burger Kitchen?
Well, exactly. But, you know, sort of, should we be snobs is the other question. Personally, yes, I think we should be. I really kind of feel that by making wine or art or films mass media style or takeaway food, we have made it the right of everybody, and we're losing that focus on a really good wine or a really good food or a really good film. Actually takes some creativity and some artwork, and we shouldn't dumb down everything. And that maybe is a big problem with wine, dumbing down everything.
You need creativity and artistry to make good rosé. I love that. Yeah. I suppose there's a place for everyday consistent styles of rosé, but equally we don't have to then believe that that's where good rosé begins and ends. But on that note, I'd kind of challenge your myth by citing another myth, that Provençal rosé is all the same.
Yeah, no, you're quite right to challenge that. I put my hands up to massively oversimplifying and stereotyping. And my apologies to all those Provençal winemakers crafting characterful rosé wines. What can I say?
Now, Liz whatever you can say, Liz had something to say about this, didn't she?
So what's interesting is a vineyard like Clos Cibonne, who for years have made large oak barreled with floor. And a lot of people go, but that isn't Provence rosé. And I go, yes, it is.
So this is a really valid point. There are some brilliant rosé wines made in Provence and the south of France more broadly. And Clos Cibonne is a great example.
Yeah.
It was one of the most popular and cited rosés in the Twitter survey we did a few years back for our previous rosé episode, including by wine luminaries like Randall Graham in the US. Now, they're based between Marseille and Saint-Tropez. It's a family-run enterprise. They use an intriguing grape variety, Tiburon. Tiburon, is that how we say it? Tiburon. And things like old oak and even floor in some of their cuvées to make really characterful, elegant, age-worthy rosés. And do you know what else they use?
It's all coming out now.
Dark bottles.
Yes, yes, come on.
Which shows you they take the quality of their wine seriously. Anyway, so you talked to Caroline Deforges at the Fine Rosé Day. She's the 5th generation, and here's what she had to say.
So it's a very beautiful story. We are planted at 90% of particular grapes. The name is Tiburon. So Tiburon, it's very particular. It comes from Mesopotamia, arriving in Greece and also in Italy. In Ligure, you can find a cuisine of the Tiburon. It's the Rosé. And today the Tiburon, it's only 2% of the plantation in Provence. And us, we are planted, as I told you, at 90% of Tiburon. So maybe we can say that Clos Cibonne is the house of the Tiburon. Today we produce 80% of rosé. And the blend of the rosé, it's 90% of Tibourin and 10% of Grenache.
So you are all about rosé, really. You make a little bit of other things, but rosé is your main thing. You make it with this fantastic variety that's not very well known, Tibourin. Tell us about, your style. What are you doing with your rosé to make it different and unique?
Yeah, it's a very fun story because when my parents decided to take the vineyard of my grandparents, my dad arriving with his very strange bottle because, as you know, Tibourin, Clos Cibonne, it's very different than the other domain in Provence. Because our label is very rich, very rustic, very old. We have a green bottle, and the wine is very colored. And when he come back at the vineyard 20 years ago, everyone said to my dad, "I'm sorry, but we can't do anything for you. You know, rosé, it's very clear, it's very it's very beautiful, it's elegant. But you, with your bottle and your wine style, it's not possible." But he decided to continue because he was in love with these grapes, the Tibourin. So the style of the Tibourin is something different. It's quite very spicy. You have some pepper, white pepper, black pepper. You can have also some fruits. It's very fruity, very fresh. We are not too far from the sea, the Mediterranean Sea. So we have a very influence of the sea with a very salty tasting also at the end. And the Clos Cibonne rosé are rosé from terroir and also rosé of age. We can keep it for 30, 35 years old easier. We opened a vignette from 1988 in Wine Paris, and it was very good. The particularity of the rosé, it's because we make some age in all the hock. It's old fodder from our grandfather of 100 years old. They are from 1903, and the wine stayed during 1 year inside this hock. That's why the Tibourin is so particular. Because of the grapes, because of the generation knowledge, and also because of the hock.
We should mention that Vignette is the name of one of their wines, and that Foudre or Foudre are big oak vats used for making and storing wine, but not often rosé, interestingly. Anyway, quite a bit in there, some of which we'll come on to. But it's fair to say in the meantime that Clos Cibonne doesn't make your archetypal Provençal rosé, That's absolutely true. These are wines with real character. They're sort of unique in style, well worth trying.
Yeah, and we'll recommend a couple in due course, won't we?
Yes, actually,
but Caroline did touch on a few myths we wanted to bust. Prime among them, this notion, which I mentioned in the intro, that rosé can't be fine wine. That rosé is simple and fun and light-hearted, and we should pat it on the head and drink it by the bucket load and not expect anything great or exceptional from it.
So this is a classic case of a self-fulfilling prophecy in my book. We haven't expected that much of rosé, so it hasn't delivered much. At least on a large scale, you might typically judge a fine wine category by, or maybe perhaps just in received opinion. But we've had Caroline there explaining that hers is a terroir-driven, age-worthy, characterful rosé, all of which I totally agree with. This is what Liz Gabay had to say.
I've often said to people what I'm looking for. I'm not looking for perfection. Perfection is dull. Who wants perfection? I am looking for a wine that I will take a sip of and I'll go, that was interesting. That has stimulated my taste, my ideas, my curiosity. And for me, rosé still has that because it's still quite a young category. Whereas red wine, there's nothing more boring for many of us seeing lists of en primeur Bordeaux. I mean, most of us don't live that life. Most of us want a bottle of wine for Friday night, Saturday night that we've enjoyed. And I would still drink red, I would still drink white. I love good champagne. And I want rosé to be able to achieve that. I want more people to recognise that there is rosé that can achieve that.
I also put it to Caroline that many people say rosé can't be fine wine. And by the way, pédagogie in French means education in English.
It's funny because 1 month ago I went to a gastronomic restaurant in Paris, one of our customers, and I saw the menu of wine, and I didn't saw the section rosé. I say, but where is my vignette? I say, sorry, I put you in the white section because it's too hard for us in the gastronomic restaurant to sell the rosé. So I say, yes, but if you don't do the job, nobody can do the job. So I think we need to make some pedagogy because it's not because it's a rosé, because rosé it's a real wine, and you need to make some pedagogy to explain that it's the role of the sommelier, that it could be also a wine. And our wine, if you close your eyes and if you have a black glass, you can imagine that it's finally a white wine. So that's fun. That it's a rosé, but it could be something different too.
Could be a very fine white wine in another world.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if we can make this a proper myth, but some people do seem to believe that rosé is just a vaguely alcoholic, brightly coloured drink to be consumed poolside in the summer, possibly which tastes better if you're wearing a bikini. Yep, I'm going to go with that myth. Sure. I'm going to go with it. Anyway, this is what Caroline said.
I think rosé, in the mind of people, it's holiday. It's holiday, it's summer, it's beach, it's a swimming pool, rosé piscine. But yes, more and more you can find it in a gastronomic place. At Sketch we have one of our rosé. It's a 3 Michelin restaurant in London. So we are happy to see that finally mindset could change about the color of the wine.
Here's what Liz had to say. And what would you say to people who say rosé is just for summer drinking?
What sad people.
I think the point she's making is that rosé is for year-round drinking, not just for summer.
Like puppies and Christmas, yep.
Almost exactly. They're drinking puppies. Yeah, let's not.
Don't go there. Don't go there.
Let's not go there. Caroline did touch on another myth there to move on, that rosé is not a food wine. That it's just for garden quaffing and not for a serious meal at the table. But actually, we've already seen from the market data that this attitude is changing. And as Caroline says, top restaurants are putting serious rosés on, not just to cover all style bases, but, also to recognise their ability to pair well with top quality food.
Here's what Caroline suggested by way of food match for her rosé.
The best match with our rosé, maybe for the cuvée des vignettes, it's the bouillabaisse, a traditional Provençal dish. We can also have a rouget, a very strong fish, with some olive oil and some tomato. It's perfect too. But we recommend also with all the food like Indian food or Asian food, curry lamb, Moroccan food too. It's very perfect because it's spicy as a tibourin, so it's a very good match.
And we can attest to how well Clos Cibonne's wines go with all kinds of food. Rosé is really underappreciated in this sense. A good rosé can actually be far more versatile with food than white or red, accommodating different flavours, but working with lots of different things as well. And don't get me started on rosé champagne and sushi.
I know where that road leads. It's terrifying. But one other thing Caroline touched on was this concept of aging rosé. So this is our 11th, 12th myth?
Not sure. 12th?
Call it
12. Call it 12.
It's a nice round number. That rosé isn't age-worthy. Because good rosé absolutely can and does age. As Caroline said, they age their wines 30 plus years. We've got a nearly 40-year-old recommendation coming up in a moment. And Liz has a cellar full of old rosés. She loves showing guests. She's invited us, I seem to remember.
I think she
definitely
need to
need to go. Anyway, here are a few words from her.
What are you looking for in a rosé? What I'm looking for is the same as I look in a red and a white wine. I'm looking for balance. I'm looking for complexity. I'm looking for ageability.
Just like great white or red, there's no reason good rosé can't age. Yeah. Quite right. Okay, so a few last myths to bust. Firstly, that rosé needs to be served ice cold, or perhaps even worse, with ice cubes in it. Yeah,
we've touched on this before, but we do tend to serve our whites and rosés too cold. Good white or rosé should be served at 8 to 12, 8 to 14 degrees centigrade, and our fridges are what? 4 degrees centigrade. So we have our 20-20 rule. That is to take whites and rosés out of the fridge 20 minutes before you serve them. And the final bit of this rule is to put reds into the fridge for 20 minutes before you serve them, because we tend to serve them too warm, but that's not really our focus here.
Now, as for ice, that will chill any character right out of the wine, and it'll dilute it too. So if you really want to go for it, go for it. But if you've got a nice rosé, don't serve it bone-numbingly cold, or you won't be able to taste it properly. And if you really, really must put something in it, freeze some grapes and use those. At least they won't dilute the wine, will they?
Okay, here's a myth for the winemaking geeks, or perhaps the winemakers out there, I don't know, that rosé needs to be made quick, clean and consistent. Made in stainless steel vats with cultured yeast in virtually sterile, lab-like conditions and bottled and released early. Yes, that can make for simple, consistent, predictable rosé, but also often quite boring rosé you get tired of easily. We want a bit more character from our rosé. Things like Caroline's Old Oak Foudre, maybe a bit of floor, whatever. Just make it a more interesting wine, please.
Life's too short for dull wine. Okay, so by my count, we're at our 15th myth, and that is that rosé is stuck in the mud. It's not evolving or interesting as a category. You asked Liz Gabay whether rosé was finally coming of age.
Yes, I think it is. I think climate change and also economic pressure. People realise they can sell rosé. They can have a rosé entry-level wine which they can sell, and that will help finance everything else. They are also finding that gastronomically rosé is helping. It's coming of age. It's coming of age very slowly. We're not getting boom. It is... There are quite a few wines that we've tasted where we have thought this is radically different. This is going to change the world, and we're still waiting. It's like the tsunami is not happening. It's a ripple effect. It's sort of...
So the evolution is happening, but it's happening slowly.
Incredibly slowly. We're hoping to speed it up. That is our main ambition, just because we're impatient. And I kind of feel until we can speed it up, we can't get to the next level.
Next level rosé, the Romani Conti of rosé. Here we come, but very slowly, apparently. Okay, so my last myth is a slightly tongue-in-cheek one, like our first one, and that is the myth that real men don't drink rosé. Now, we're not talking about my masculinity here, just to be clear.
Wouldn't dream of questioning that, would we?
No, for understandable reasons, but no, it's clear that real men embrace rosé for the delicious drink that it is. They don't want to miss out because of some utterly misguided notion that rosé is somehow a girly drink. And this phenomenon does have a name, which is brosé, which is whereby men embrace rosé, and it's something I heartily endorse, for the record.
Yeah, joking aside, though, there is demographic data showing evidence of this trend, so it is a real thing.
It is a real thing.
Even if I'm not totally convinced by the term brosé. But to move on, my final myth is where we get a bit meta, maybe zoom out a bit for the bigger picture. But it's the following, that rosé is a clearly defined thing, because there is no legal definition of what rosé is, no legal parameters, at least at an international level.
Yeah, I think the OIV has said as much, and it's an interesting thought, isn't it? It's I guess it ties back into what we were saying about rosé being a spectrum rather than a single colour, covering lots of different styles and hues. And of course there are different ways to make it, aren't there? From just quickly pressing red wine grapes to get a touch of colour to bleeding juice off during the early stages of red wine making, even adding a little red wine into white, which is often what happens with rosé champagne, for example. So
yeah. So perhaps we should go back to the wise words of Caroline at Clos Cibonne when you asked her what one message she wanted to give our listeners about rosé wine.
Open your mind, taste, you will be surprised, and don't look the color, just taste and you will see.
Open your mind and you will see. Wise words, if ever there were some. Rosé can free your mind if you let it, which is why we need to rethink our rosé.
Right. I think that's quite enough myth-busting. I think we did a good 17 now, which isn't bad. Okay. But now it's time to recommend a few wines before we call it quits and sink into a glass ourselves. And you tasted quite a few wines at the Fine Rosé Day you wanted to mention, didn't you?
Yeah. Okay, so I tried some really posh stuff and some really quirky, intriguing stuff too, including things like rosés from Greece, Slovakia, Rioja, Israel, Austria, Argentina, Tuscany, even Tibet.
Oh, Tibet.
Yeah. It was a fascinating tasting, and I'll put a full list of recommendations up on the show notes on our website.
But if you were to pick out a few by way of brief highlights...
Oh, okay. talking of characterful rosé, good Rioja Rosado is a wonderful thing. You know, especially older stuff like Tondoña, we're all familiar with. And the one that was there was the Hacienda López de Haro Rioja Clásica Gran Reserva Rosado 2012. It was wonderfully complex and evocative and serious. You know, at 12 years old, a real treat. Also, the Famille Perrin Fleur de Miraval. Miraval, a well-known rosé name. This one's from Champagne. It's their ER3 champagne. That was also delicious, you know, as good rosé champagne can be.
Didn't you taste some properly old stuff too?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So the Champagne Alexandre Bonnet Rosé de Rissé, 1985.
Wow.
Was pretty stunning too. This is Pure Pinot Noir, one of the oldest rosé appellations in the world. It's a still wine, even though it's from the Champagne region. It tasted of leather and truffle and dried fruit with a wonderfully complex and resonant palate profile. It's great wine that just happens to be a deep rosé. You know, they also had a 2005 there that was really impressive too. So
what about the south of France, this hot spot for posh rosé?
Posh rosé. So there are definitely a couple of wines I'd highlight in that category. Gérard Bertrand's Clos du Temple is definitely posh. It's also pretty delicious. Both the 2021 and 2022 vintages were seriously sort of complex. I also did like the Domaine La Soufraine Cuvée Sainte-Catherine from Bandol. It's a really sort of deep-hued, gutsy wine with lots to say for itself, and some nice dark bottles too.
Oh, jolly good. And which wines were tasting well from our beloved Clos Cibonne? Okay,
so yeah, the Tradition 2022 was beautifully poised, a very rewarding kind of rosé. The Cuvée Caroline 2022 is oaky but really well managed, very well integrated and sort of saline on the finish, so very foodie. Then the Vignette, which we mentioned a couple of times in the pod, which Caroline mentioned too. It's the one aged under floor. It's just yeasty and complex and gorgeous. I think possibly my favourite of their lineup, I think. And finally then the Château Cibonne 2020 Cuvée Marius was very long and serious stuff.
Okay, so finally you mentioned some quirky stuff. What about that?
We do love a bit of quirk, don't we? So Catena from Argentina, Catena's La Marchigiana Criolla Rosé 2023 is made without sulfur in amphora while fermented. It's a bit mad and oxidative, but it's also fun and succulent. More like a light red than a rosé, but very cool, very Moorish. There were also some cool Greek wines from Ktima Troupis, made from the Moscofilero grape, which is usually a white, but it has darkish skins, a bit like Pinot Gris, so it can make rosé. Their Hoof and Lure 2023 was very perfumed, exotic, and sort of crunchy.
Didn't Liz have her own wine there too?
Yeah, I was just coming on to that actually. This is the Sen, S-E-N 2020. It's made by Liz with Ben and Slovakian winemaker Vladimir Magula. It's made from Cabernet and Blaufränkisch, all organic, 24-hour maceration, spontaneous ferment in barrel, aged for a year. It's mad as a hatter as a wine. It's funky and hazy and a bit cidery, but it's also really characterful and grippy and sort of textured and wild. It's gorgeous for those that like that kind of thing, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Okay, so I think after all that, I'm not due a cheeky rosé recommendation as well.
Come on then.
And well, I'm just going to pick one of the many exciting roses that we've tried recently, and it is the Heretics Pale Rosé 2023. It's a brand new release, barrel fermented Pinot Noir rosé grown in Essex, and it's just delicious. You know, you've got aromas of sour cherry and red plum, and there's just a tiny hint of sort of spiced nut from the oak. And then in terms of taste, it's dry, it's elegant, and what I really like about it is the way it manages to be quite characterful, not quite on Liz's level, but it is characterful. It's a bit yeasty, but not crazily so. Yeah. So I think it would appeal to a broad range of tastes.
Yeah. Okay. That's a fine recommendation. I can also, you said one recommendation. I can see you've got a can there.
Oh,
as well.
Yeah.
Does that not count?
I have got a sneaky second recommendation too. So this is just really to tie in with Liz saying that cans are good. I've got the Canned Wine Company Grenache Rosé number 3 2021 from the south of France, which is very light, refreshing, easy drinking rosé with some subtle strawberries and cream and wild herb flavours. But that's in a little can there.
So we're going to finish on the can. That's perfect. So what a note to wrap things up on. By way of final summary, we need to rethink rosé. Let's not obsess over colour. Let's say goodbye to those silly, clear, colourless bottles. Let's embrace and encourage the notion that rosé can be great. It can be food-friendly, serious, complex, age-worthy wine that's not just for swimming pools or summer or ice cubes. Let rosé free our minds, people. I think there's a T-shirt in that, isn't there?
The printing presses are whirring into action as we speak. Now, our thanks to Liz Gabay, MW, and Caroline Deforges from Clos Cibonne. Thanks also to Liz and Ben for putting on the outstanding Fine Rosé Day tasting. And of course, thanks to you for listening. Until next time, cheers.